Hi there, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast, which is brought to you by fans for fans, where the content is absolutely free. It is episode 153 of the flagship show. I'm your host tonight. I'm Colin Armstrong. As I say all the time, guys, it's not just the pod we have here at Gersnet. You know, if you get onto the website, you'll find some articles there, you know, match previews, match reviews, all that kind of stuff. Frankie's got his social media, obviously. There's a history archive on the website, as well as the forum, so get yourself on there. If you like what we're doing here at Gersnet, then give us a wee follow, give Frankie a follow and give us a like and a subscribe on our YouTube channel. We're live tonight. It's a Sunday night. There's been no Rangers this week. It's an international break, but we'll have a wee look at what's been going on anyway. So we're live tonight on the Sunday night, but the pod will be available to download and stream on a variety of platforms from tomorrow, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify. All the usual places, guys, where you get your pods. And I'll bring in my guests, and it's two stalwarts this week. It's two guys that have been here pretty much from day one. Well, Ross has definitely been here for day one. I think John was not too long after that. Or were you in from day one, John?
I don't think so. No, I think
Glory Hunter. Thought that. Nah, Glory
Hunter.
Hunter.
In after the first few weeks.
Yeah. See, two founding members and a Glory Hunter. That's what we've got.
Exactly.
Aye. Okay. So how are you doing, John? How are you doing? You okay? You had a good week?
I'm not bad. Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Sunday night, it's school holidays, a week ahead of me. Children demanding things, wanting money. This is my escape. Yeah. This is a highlight for me tonight. It's all downhill from now.
Your life is in a pretty bad state if your highlight is sitting talking to me on a Sunday night, John. Let's face it, that is pretty bad. I can't think of anything grimmer, to be honest with you.
The last time, I've not been on for a while, and I'll tell you what's grimmer. The last time I was on, a guy, you know, the comments on YouTube, we don't see them during this. A pal of mine sent me a copy of the comments, and somebody in the comments said, "That guy John looks like Big Angie, except he's been deflated." And I've really been in therapy since then. You know, I spent the last month and a half been, you know. So I've kept growing the beard, so I stopped looking a bit like Big Angie. Now I just look like Steptoe.
That's it. You've got your new nickname now. We'll just call you Ange Ball.
That's good. That's good. Another 6 weeks before I'm on again.
We were at the Pollock game last week. It was quite good, and we bumped into David Fraser as well, our fellow podder. 6 goals, 3 sending offs, and I was at the game yesterday, and I saw the keeper score. It's the first time I've ever seen it, a goalkeeper scoring for a kick out. I
could see us doing a juniors roundup podcast before this season's over. I think
that's a good laugh.
I know it was a great game. It was great fun. It was good to see football at that level again. Been a while. I used to go and see Yoker, and a long time ago I used to go and see all the Springburn teams. But it's been a couple of years since I was last at a junior game, and the Pollock-Auchinleck game was great fun. Cracking atmosphere, game that had everything. It's a good old style ground. So no, we had a good day, didn't we?
It was good. It was good. I enjoyed it yesterday as well. As I said, the keeper scored. For those who are watching, Frankie claimed off air that, you know, he was a bit of a keeper back in the day, that he's also scored. But none of us are buying it. I think he's talking about porkies there. But there's no way that happened. Absolutely no way. Anyway, Ross, are you believing that? My fellow founding member of the pod, are you believing that Frankie scored from a goalkeeper's kick out?
So he told us that probably about 10 or 11 minutes ago, right? I don't know how much you know, but part of my job is to find out things online about people.
Right.
And no, I don't believe it, because you think he said it was a Milk Cup semi-final 1980. I've been going through the records, and I'll tell you what, I'm not convinced. I'm not having that.
It's been a 5-a-side game or something. You know what I mean? I think he's just at it. So, you know, how are you coping with no Rangers this week? Did you watch the Scotland game yesterday, or did it not bother you?
I did. No, I did watch the Scotland game, and enjoyed it probably more so than any other Scotland game in the past 5 years, I'd have thought. It's good. I tend to, much like you boys, go to the juniors. I go to watch some non-league football, and been doing that kind of thing down here as well. So getting a wee bit of a football fix, but it's not quite the same. Like I say, Scotland scored the winner yesterday, and I had a smile rather than a stoner, I suppose is how you'd describe it, as I might have had with Rangers. But altogether, a quiet weekend, and I'm not complaining.
I think you just put John off his tee there. I'll be honest with you, my arse did not leave the couch on that one. I must admit. I mean, I didn't watch it all. It was kind of on, and I was kind of pottering about and watching it, and then having to do stuff. And actually, when Israel went 2-1 up, my son was at the game. I sent him a wee text like, "Lol." He didn't respond. But no, I've got to be honest with you. I just don't feel it with Scotland anymore at all. I don't. It's gone. It's quite sad in a way, but it is what it is. Right, guys. I thought we would, as I said, there's no Rangers as such to talk about this week because it's international break. But there's still been a few things that we can talk about. So we'll have a wee look at some of the stuff that's happened through the week. I think it would be good to sort of revisit the Ryan Porteous stuff since his Hibs appeal was not back, and I think it's a good sort of opportunity to look at the season so far and sort of gauge where we are. So John, I'll come to you first. I like you do this every now and again. You go into a big rant, like 10, 11 tweets making a point, and it was all about the Newcastle takeover, and I agreed with a lot of what you said, to be honest with you. I mean, what's happening down there is just, I find it quite depressing, actually, and I don't think it's good for the game. But the inevitable thing came on the back of Newcastle's takeover, because you would imagine that Steve Bruce is like just waiting on the chop, and maybe quite literally, given who the owners are. That axe could be a literal axe, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I think Steve Bruce knows he's tees up. You know what I mean? He's not going to be there much longer. They're going to go for someone else. Inevitably, Steven Gerrard's been linked to the job. I mean, I'm not worried about it at all. I'm quite confident in it. I mean, I know everyone's saying, it'll be big money, serious money. They'll go for the top players. But I don't know if that suits Gerrard. And I genuinely think if Gerrard was to go without getting Rangers into the Champions League, he would feel that he'd kind of not completed everything that he wanted to complete. Given, whoever wins it, the SPFL this season, automatic group stages, he must see that as a great opportunity to A, get in, and B, manage a team in that tournament and give them that kind of experience, for future jobs. And I think we all know what job he has his eye on. So, I mean, I'm fairly calm about it. I noticed today Kenny Dalglish sort of came out and said that he thinks that Gerrard will be focused on Rangers and he'll not be that interested in Newcastle job. I mean, it's funny, we spoke about Kenny Dalglish last week when we were at the Port game, sort of saying it's the big regret, that he never went to Rangers as a player. He went to Celtic, given he was a Rangers supporter. But he's doing well in trolling Celtic fans these days. Every now and again he comes out with stuff and you're like, I think you're still a bear, Kenny. Like the stuff he came out, Rangers will always be Rangers to me, because they're saying they're a new club and all that kind of stuff. And he's come out with 2 or 3 things since, and that today felt like another one. He was sort of saying you think he'll stay and he'll not go to Newcastle. How do you feel? Do you think he could be tempted, or do you think he'll see the job out up here?
I think it'd be naive to say he couldn't be tempted. He's open to the same temptations all of us are. But it would surprise me at this stage. I think you're right. I think Steve Bruce probably probably shouldn't be buying a house in Newcastle anytime over the next couple of weeks.
Is that not a rule of life anyway, though, to be honest?
Probably is. Yeah, it probably is. And I kind of feel sorry for Steve Bruce because he's a local guy. He was a Newcastle fan growing up. But I think him taking the Sunderland job for a period of time was kind of ended his any affection that the Newcastle fans might have had from. But I mean, let's take it as the compliment that it is, that when a team suddenly comes into a lot of money, then Gerrard is being talked about as a potential manager for them, because that says he's obviously doing something right with us, and it says that his profile is growing again in England as a manager. I would be very surprised if he's who Newcastle are looking for. I mean, none of us really know what the guys that own Newcastle have got in mind, but you kind of look at Manchester City, you look at Chelsea, I think they're going to follow that kind of template. I suspect they'll look for a manager from, abroad. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise if someone like Mancini was the kind of guy that we're going for, a guy who already knows that league, who's managed there, a guy who's done it at a very high level, a guy who's used to dealing with the kind of agents and people that are going to be floating around Newcastle just now. But the biggest problem anyone going into Newcastle has just now is the team aren't good enough. So, I can't see them attracting anybody of the kind of top managers for a season or two yet, until they've kind of got a squad put together. So I'm not particularly worried. I think if you'd asked me the same thing about Souness a month before he joined Liverpool, I would probably have said the same thing, that he'd want to stay and see the job out. And, as I said, everybody can be tempted. Does a move to Newcastle allow him to spend a bit more time in Merseyside? I don't really think it does. I don't think it's much closer than he is just now. So I don't think it's got a great deal there. And like you, I think he probably would quite like to get us into the Champions League and have a crack at the Champions League as a manager. And he's going to get a much better chance staying at Rangers to do that than he's ever going to have at Newcastle. Or how much money they throw at them. That they've got they're a while away from competing for the Champions League. So I think he'll stay where he is. I'm fairly confident. My concern just now is that somebody tempts away one of our coaches. That I don't have too many concerns just now with Gerrard. I think Gerrard is fairly settled, and like you, I think he has I think we all know that the club he has his eye on, and he kind of knows he has to do it up here for more than one season for that to happen. But perhaps somebody looking at Beale or Culture or something might be more of a concern. I'm not suggesting Newcastle will do that, but actually that would probably be more of a concern for me just now, is somebody offering them a chance to become a manager in their own right, kind of breaking up the band.
I get what you're saying. The Souness comparison is quite interesting, but I remember feeling really confident when he was linked with the Liverpool job, thinking, he'll no go. But I think you have to remember the sort of stuff that was going on with Souness at the time. There was a lot of negativity. He was getting in fights with tea ladies at St Johnstone, for Christ's sake. That's the sort of level of nonsense he was getting involved in, and I think that had a large part in his final decision. And he admits now that it's the worst decision he ever made. He regrets it. I don't think Steven Gerrard has that same negativity. I think everything is fairly rosy in the garden. Okay, form wise, we're kind of off colour a wee bit at the moment. But no, I must admit, I feel fairly confident.
And it's not Liverpool that are coming calling.
No,
it's Newcastle. It's a club he has no connection to. It's a club he has no emotional attachment with. Souness and Liverpool, there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Gerrard and Liverpool, there's a connection there, but there isn't with Newcastle. So, they may well come and offer him an obscene amount of money, and the kind of money nobody can turn around. But I can't see it. I think it's paper talk. International week tends to bring these kind of stories out because they don't have anything to write about, and so you suddenly find this daft kind of story. Someone asks a bookmaker somewhere to give us your bets, and then suddenly you've got half a dozen newspapers writing 2-page spreads on this. I think it's all paper talk. I don't think there's anything in it.
Ross, on the game yesterday, the Scotland game, Nathan Patterson got started ahead of O'Donnell, and as I said, I wasn't watching it fully concentrated. I was having to run people about, so I was in and out and doing stuff and all that kind of thing. But I would say I saw about an hour of it, and from what I saw, I kind of felt he kind of struggled a wee bit in the first half. He looked a wee bit off colour, kind of similar to the performance he put in certainly in the first half against Hibs. He didn't look himself so much. Second half a bit better, but today when I was flicking through social media, it was all the Celtic fans and Aberdeen fans, not your usual, saying he was shy, shouldn't have got a game, blah blah blah. O'Donnell should have started. But how did you think? He's very early in his international career. He's still very young. Him and Gilmore. There's a lot of talk about them being sort of two linchpins in that team for the next sort of however long. How did you feel he coped, and how do you think he played?
Yeah, it'd be very easy to sit here and say he was the best player on the park and he should start every game. Now he's undoubtedly Scotland's best right back. I don't really think there's any doubting that he's better at football than Stephen O'Donnell. But yeah, first half he was poor. I think it's fair to say he could have done better in the lead up to the foul that they gave away for Israel's goal. Second half he completely turned it around, and it's probably the mark of a 19-year-old footballer. He's not overly consistent. He's got a lot to learn. He's certainly got a lot to learn at the international level. Israel have decent forward players, and I think think we all knew that. I think he was chosen for a reason as well, because Israel are crap at the back, and he poses a fair amount of attacking threat. And I thought he did the job that he was brought in to do in the second half. His link-up play with the likes of McGinn and Gilmore was really, really strong second half. You could see that Patterson and Gilmore had played football together before. They had a really strong understanding, and obviously they've come from the same place. There were a number of times where he looked keen and ready to go and take on his man at the byline and cut inside, but maybe had instructions to check back and recycle the ball, and that's okay. That's the way that the manager wants him to play. But definitely a game of two halves for Patterson. Not great first 45 minutes, but really, really turned it on second half. I mean, I think we can sometimes be a little bit hypersensitive to the barking of idiots on the internet. I mean, I don't think it's particularly important what Celtic fans on Twitter want to say about Nathan Patterson's performance. Celtic have dominated that Scotland side for a good decade now, but by my calculation, Rangers and Celtic had the same number of players in the starting 11 yesterday, which was one. We had Nathan Patterson, they had Callum McGregor. I don't think they particularly like that as a fan base, that we're now kind of back on an even footing. So I'm really happy to see. You could see what it meant to him after the game. I don't think he'll have been particularly proud of his performance, first half in particular, but you could see that he was really pleased to be part of that moment, part of that side. I think it's important for Rangers to be contributing to the national team. I kind of grew up with a Scotland squad that was dominated or had a really core spine of Rangers players. And I think that that's a good thing for us as a club. I think that Gerrard appreciates that and Gerrard rates that as well. All of the issues that we've spoken about a number of times on this show about the SFA, about the Tartan Army, about Steve Clarke, none of that goes away because we have a good player playing for the national side. And I think we all can enjoy yesterday's result and still have all of those reservations and try to find a way to kind of, I don't know, juxtapose those two things and move forward with supporting the national side. But when it comes to the player, he's a 19-year-old lad and he's starting for his country. He's now contributed significantly to them progressing into a very good position to potentially qualify for a World Cup. I think it's a good thing.
Same with yourself, Ross. I mean, looking at some of the impact of, some of the other Rangers players and their various international squads. I see Sakala scored for Zambia tonight, and it was a really, really good goal. So hopefully that will help him. Balogun, I saw he scored as well, although rather worryingly, he also came off injured. And given our centre half situation, that could be a developing story for the game against Hearts on Saturday. But I really wanted to talk about Yanis Hadji's goal against Germany. I mean, since he's came back from injury, he's just no looked himself. I think, I thought he started the season really strongly. He obviously picked up that injury out for a couple of games. He's came back in and just not really looked on it. But the goal that he scored, I mean, it's typical Hadji. I mean, to me, the biggest attribute that he's got. See if you were to ask someone what foot does he shoot with, I don't think anyone knows because he's so comfortable with both, and that's what he does. He does the German defender as if with a double step over, and sort of hits it with his left foot. I mean, you think about like the goals that he scored against Braga. The free kick and all that kind of thing. Right foot. His first one was left foot. He is so. I think as a defender, it must be a nightmare because he can turn either way. With most players, you can say, right, he's comfortable on his left or he's comfortable on his right. He's going to try and turn this particular way. And as a defender, you can try and prepare for that. The worst thing, surely, for a defender is if a player's coming at you and you're thinking, what way is he going to go? Because if he goes that way, he's as comfortable and as good on either foot. So I hope this puts him back in a position now and gives him a wee bit of confidence because I thought he started the season really, really well. I thought he was looking potential sort of player of the season material if he continued that, but he's tailed off. And I mean, Germany. I mean, I know they've struggled the last few years, but it's one of the big major nations. It's a great moment for him.
It's a fantastic moment for him. Probably a fantastic moment for the directors of Rangers as well to see actually he's doing that on an international stage against one of the best teams in the world. That's another couple of million on the price tag if anyone ever wants to make a bid for a player. Yeah, what you're saying about is he going this way or is he going that way? I mean, the top class defenders do their research on their opposition and they know their strong foot, their weaker foot. They know to show him down a certain side, or they know to try and force him to cut back, or whatever it might be. You can see, I think it's Antonio Rudiger, isn't it, that he nutmegs?
Yeah.
You can see in Rudiger's face, he's going, I don't know what this boy's going to do. And he kind of covers both. Is he going to go this way, or is he going to go that way? And he goes through the middle and nutmegs him. And that's what you get when there is someone so kind of two-footed. And it's classic Hadji, because he's made the boy look silly, and then he's I think he's caught the keeper off guard as well, because he kind of actually just toe pokes it.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful goal. Sakala's goal as well, by the way. One of the defenders had to pay to get back in. He took him so far out of the game, you know. Yeah, you could see him get into his back pocket for change to pay to get back into the game. And as you and I know, Equatorial Guinea are producing some of the highest quality defenders in world football at the moment. The new Maldini and Baresi and all that. Yeah. So, look, it's a lovely goal from Sakala as well. Again, absolutely embarrassing some defenders and finishing with real style. So I hope for both of them it does them a lot of good in terms of confidence. I think that Hadji is one of our players who is every player is a confidence player naturally. They're all human, but I think Hadji, I think Barisic, players like that really do need big moments to believe in themselves again. And Hadji, stop-start season. And I guess even last season, you probably never really felt that we were getting everything out of Yanis Hadji, that there was always a little bit more that he could bring. And we've seen nights like Braga, where he really turned it on. There was the game, this is really bad because I've forgotten what game it was, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where he came on as a sub and we scored within about 2 minutes to change the game and went on to win. So he has these sort of flashes of real brilliance.
Was it the Livy game? Was it the cup game?
The Livy Cup game, we won it 2-0, that's right. So look, I think he's an excellent player. I think that sometimes we don't necessarily know how to utilise him still to get the best out of him, and I think that he is, let's say, mercurial. He fades in and out sometimes, not necessarily in the same game, but over a 3 or 4 game period, he'll go from excellent to ineffective, and then he'll be dropped for a bit. We never seem to get a really consistent run out of Yanis Hadji, but yeah, really pleased for him. You could see again what it meant to him to score for his country, and Leon Balogun, Yanis Hadji, and Fashion Sakala all scoring in the same international window is excellent. And let's not forget, Joe Aribo playing in that Nigeria game as well. Calvin Bassey was on the bench. Kamar Roof was, I think, on the bench for Jamaica against the States. It's great to see us represented. Borna Barisic on the bench for Croatia as well. So great to see us representing internationally. And let's just sort of cross our fingers on Leon Balogun, because that is not something that we need right now. Is more issues at the back.
John, on another centre half who's out on loan, Katic. I was reading today that he scored yesterday for Hajduk Split. Don't know why they had a round of games during an international weekend. I'll have to check that. But apparently in his celebration, he actually burst out greeting. He got quite emotional in the celebration. It's his first goal since that header against Celtic in 2019. That won the won the game that day. Sorry. In terms of Katic, it's good to see him coming back, and given the sort of the chat earlier on about Balogun and the potential for there to be a real problem at centre half, given Hollander's out injured at the moment. Is there an argument to say that we could maybe bring him back earlier, in January if the situation develops? Because you would think a goal would give him the confidence. I mean, he's obviously getting game time over there. He's built up something horrific. His whole body shape is totally different now. And given the sort of centre half situation, I mean, if Balogun is injured, could you see a situation where Katic might actually come back a wee bit earlier?
Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of his loan agreement. I'm not sure if he can be recalled at any time or if it has to be in the January window, or I'm not entirely sure how that works. But yeah, I mean, we're an injury to Balogun away from playing Bassey with one of the boys for the B team on the bench. So absolutely, you could see Gerrard deciding, well, what, we do need to do something. We have a problem here.
It doesn't seem like he trusts Simpson either, though. You know what I mean? It's so you're saying Bassey, but Simpson as well. I don't think he trusts him.
Well, he's not really been in the picture recently. I assume Simpson was one of the secret COVID kids or something, because he's kind of, because you would have expected him to have played. I would have expected him to have had more game time by now. Even when all the centre halves are fit, Gerrard quite likes to rotate the ones that play with Goldson. Far less when we've got guys injured. I've not seen enough of Simpson to know if he's going to make it or not. If everyone I think needs a few games to find their feet, and I haven't seen enough of him to know whether he's going to be the player he is. He's played so few games in his career that he needs a run of games, and that's the thing with Katic just now. Katic needs a run of games. Katic needs to get his match fitness back up. He needs to go into a few challenges and see how his knee comes through him. And I think what we're doing, seeing the bigger picture, I think that's the right thing to do. I think sending him to a league he's familiar with, sending him there and potentially getting a season that the Croatian league is is probably not quite as good as the Scottish league, but they can't be much in it. I suppose actually you're probably your third and fourth place teams in Croatia are probably better than the third and fourth teams in Scotland. So that's probably incorrect what I said there. But either way, it's a similar standard. If you can go there, get regular game time, I think that's the best thing for his career. I hope we don't have to recall him, but I agree with you entirely. I think there's a chance we could. I've noticed it's been the Northern Irish lad that they've been calling up to the bench from the B team, and not Leon King, because Leon King I think was expected to be kind of the next in line centre half, but it's the lad. Is it McClelland?
Yeah, we were talking about this at the Portal game last week, wasn't it? It was David Fraser that was mentioning it. Aye.
Yeah, so it's been the lad McClelland that's been getting onto the bench. So it may be that he's they feel maybe he's ready for. He's maybe ready for some game time. I haven't actually seen any of the B team. I've seen some highlights of their games, but I haven't actually seen a game myself. But I know the lad McClelland's made, the Northern Ireland kind of age group teams. Seems to be progressing quite well. So it may be that, maybe he's the future. But it's a concern. I don't know the extent of Balogun's injury either. But, if he was out for, 3 or 4 weeks, then, yeah, that would be with a game against Hearts coming up, with important games against Brøndby coming up. You would be wanting at least 2 centre halves playing at centre half, and not an inexperienced right back. So we're not going to bring him back for Europe. I'd be amazed if we brought him back before Christmas, but it wouldn't surprise me if we brought him back in January. If this continues, particularly if Helander's out for an extended period. If that looks like a season, kind of season-ending injury, then. That might be how it works.
I stay with you now, John, because Ross is too young to talk about the next topic. Again, having a wee look through the sort of the media of the day, trying to find anything to talk about for tonight's show that was Rangers related. I noticed that NARSA and a couple other sort of North American, Canadian sort of Rangers supporters clubs and stuff like that are lobbying to get Andy Gray inducted into the sort of Hampden Hall of Fame. Andy Gray, I accept that his reputation is taking a bit of battering, and for good reasons. What he was caught saying and all that at Sky, and he's kind of a bit of a joke figure now, and I get that. But I wanted to talk about that small period when he was at Rangers, right? Because I don't think I can remember a more enthusiastic Rangers supporter who played for the club. The first time I realised he was a Rangers fan was he was doing the co-commentary on a Rangers Celtic game. It was a game Ian Durrant scored. I don't know if you remember it.
I do. David Cooper's back heel.
David Cooper sort of slipped him through, and he ran in and goal. And Andy Gray was on the co-coms that day with Archie McPherson. And before the game, Archie sort of said, "Oh, what end of the ground would you be in?" And he was like, "Oh, I'd be in the Rangers end," and blah blah blah. And then, like, towards the end of his career, you know, it really was like the fag end of his career. He got his move to Rangers and he played there 6 months or something. You know, he wasn't there a huge amount of time. But he really did. Every time he played, he looked like a kid in a sweetie shop. I don't know if this is how you remember him, right? And I remember that I'd be about 15, 16 at the time. And I used to, quite often when I went to the games, I would stand outside Ibrox to get my programme signed and all the rest of it. And Andy Gray, when he came out, again, just that enthusiasm. He just, honestly, he came out with a smile as wide as the Clyde, you know, he just looked so happy to actually, you know, play for the club, you know, to achieve that ambition at that stage of his career. Every time he scored, you know, he looked like a kid at Christmas. I find him quite an interest. I know his reputation's a bit tainted now and all the rest of it, but as a Rangers player, I have to say, I enjoyed his time at the club. I thought he was a really, really likeable player and likeable character.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I should have, if I'd had a bit more time before this, I would have checked to see what the criteria is to get into the Scotland Hall of Fame, because he didn't play that many times for Scotland. You know, I had a look and he played 20 games for Scotland, scored 7 goals. At a time when Scotland were quite good, you know, at a time when Scotland were regularly qualifying for World Cups, when Scotland had some good players.
At that time, you've got Kenny Dalglish, so straight away you're struggling to get a place.
Well, Dalglish and Jordan were, like, you know, and you know, them two exceptional centre forwards. And there was other players as well who were pretty. I mean, Derek Johnson had a spell in the kind of mid to late 70s when he was absolutely this world. But so Gray didn't play as often for Scotland. He was one of these players who suffered a lot from injuries, and partly that was down to his style. You know, he was a physical player. He was a combative player. He also suffered, I think, because he played at a time in England. Now, there'll be some people listening to this who don't realise that there was football played in England before Sky TV started showing it. But they did play football in England before that. And I think part of Gray's problem is that he played at that time. So, you know, his games, you know, every single team wasn't getting played live on national TV. You know, it was a small highlights show on a Saturday night. But actually, when you look at Gray's career, you realise, you know, he was actually some player.
He was, yeah.
He had a cracking career. You know, he won the league with Everton, and he really was the talisman that season. He won the FA Cup. He won the European Cup Winners' Cup.
Winners' Cup, yeah.
He was denied a shot at the European Cup because of England teams being banned after Everton won the league, and you know, who knows what could have happened, because Everton had quite a team and English football was very, very strong at that time.
He scored the winner in the Cup Winners' Cup final. I think it was against they put Celtic out.
I couldn't have told you
controversially. Who is it? Vienna? Was it no Rapid Vienna?
Oh, the Rapid Vienna game where they get the boy through the bottle on.
Yeah,
play them again.
Celtic had initially beat them, and because of the bottle coming on the park and all the rest of it, I'm sure they were forced to play at a neutral venue, which was Old Trafford, I think.
That's right.
Rapid Vienna won and reached the final. But the thing about that,
and one of the Celtic, I know at that game, just because why. Manchester, a Celtic fan in the park attacked the Rapid Vienna player.
He kicked him square in the. Caught him in the sweet spot. That's right. I mind that. But another thing about Andy Gray is when he moved to Everton, I think they were fighting off relegation. You know, and within a season of him arriving, they'd won the league. You know, they've won the Cup Winners' Cup, they've won the FA Cup, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but I just remember him being a really enthusiastic, and I mean, he looked like how I felt it would be to play for Rangers, you know, just like running about like, oh my God, I'm playing for Rangers, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I mean, as I said, I know he's a bit not damaged, but his reputation took a wee bit of a pummeling because of him and Keys and all the sort of nonsense that they were saying on Sky, and they got caught out. But yeah, that 6 months or whatever when he was at Rangers, I must admit, I found him a likeable character, a really good player, a really honest player. You know what I mean? As you say, very competitive. I mind him scoring a last-minute equaliser against St Mirren at Love Street. Yeah, and honestly,
that is my memory of him.
And honestly, he looked like a toddler running about, like yay!
Yeah, he was a big toddler. That was all. He was carrying a bit of timber by the time he got to Rangers. He was a shrewd buy by Souness, because he obviously was a very experienced player. You know, that's a guy who'd won the league in England. This is a guy who'd played at the top flight in England. And again, I think I didn't know. I probably didn't know at the time, but I had to look when I was reading about him earlier again. That he won the Young Player of the Year and the Player of the Year at the same time.
There you go.
One of only 3 players to have ever done that in England. To have won both in the same season. So, you know, he was a player who had exceptional seasons and then would get an injury and would only play 20 games the next season. You know, it was that kind of player. He did have issues with injury. But, you know, his stats are, you know, they stand up to anybody. So I can understand, you know, NASA or whoever it is that's suggesting him for this, you know, it's not a ridiculous idea. You know, his career is quite impressive. I actually read his autobiography many years ago. And it's quite interesting. You know, I mean, his career path is quite interesting. Another player that Rangers overlooked, you know, is a guy from Dumchapel. Yeah. You know, a guy who, you know, was doing very well at youth football, and it was Dundee United that came and picked him up and signed him and took him up to Tannadice. You know, but he was quite open, just waiting for someone from Rangers to come and say, "Going to come and sign for us," and he would absolutely have done it. Yeah. You know, Rangers again. This is the thing you and I talked about last week. You know, Rangers scouting in the 70s was just terrible. The scouting around Glasgow was just terrible. When Dalglish somehow or other we managed to overlook Ken Dalglish, who was playing, you know, in the pitch along the road. Yeah. But Andy Gray, John Ward, Graham Sharp, all guys that you know, went on to play for Scotland or had great careers in England, who all wanted to play for Rangers. And somehow or other we managed to overlook. So, you know, Gray's an interesting one. You're right. You know, he's, I guess for an awful lot of people, they will only associate him with his TV time. But he was a shrewd signing by Souness because he brought a lot of experience in. Plus, he was a really bubbly character. You know, you talk there about him being like a kid in the sweet shop, and I think he was like that all through his career. You know, that really bubbly, really effervescent guy, good guy around the dressing room. You know, and Souness was clever. This was a thing he learned at Liverpool, to bring in a guy for the last third of the season, give the squad a boost, you know, shake everybody up. So somebody new here, positions under threat, just to kind of get that momentum. Something that you can't do. Can't do now. Thing, but a thing that Souness learned and brought into Rangers, and he did it to, you know, he did it with a couple of guys. Remember, he brought in Mel Sterling one season. He brought in Dale Gordon, I think, was one season as well. Nigel Spackman came in as well. You know, buying guys mid-season who just give the squad a boost, and Andy Gray did that. And it's funny, I remember that St Mirren game, and I remember actually initially the crowd kind of laughing at him. You know, he seemed, like you say, that enthusiasm. He was slow and he was big, and everybody kind of knew he was past his best. But by the end of that game, he'd won his round. By the end of that game, you realise, no, this guy's here to give 100%, and you know, this guy can contribute. So you know, why not? You know, he certainly did more in his career than an awful lot of players will do. Yeah, I agree. Ross, come back to what John said earlier on about, you know, it's international break, and so in terms of getting headlines and stuff like that, it's a bit of a silly season, you know. So a lot of reporters will just find a story for anywhere. And there was an interesting one came out today. Neil Lennon's, he seems to be on a charm offensive. He must be looking for a job, I think. But there was an interesting line in it. He sort of had a pop at Steven Gerrard. He had a pop at pretty much the whole Celtic squad, saying that some of them weren't turning up, and that Scott Brown and a couple of other, Callum McGregor, you know, their standards dipped as well because of these bad eggs in the dressing room. But then he made an interesting comment saying, you know, nobody can really question what I done. I won 5 out of 7 trophies the second time I was at the club. Steven Gerrard has won 1 out of 9. And I just kind of thought, why, you know, why would you say that? It just seemed like a pointless dig at Gerrard, and it also lacked any context. I mean, Neil Lennon was going into a squad that was, you know, like a freight train. It was like a runaway train. It was, you know, winning trophy after trophy after trophy. You know, Steven Gerrard came into a club that was on the floor, you know, after Pedro and all that kind of thing. And 1 out of 9, if you just look at the numbers, fine, fair enough. But they don't tell the full story. And I just found it a needless and a bit of a petty comment, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you're not comparing like for like there at all. The context of those two clubs at that time is clearly very important and so fundamental that you don't even need to go into the difference between Celtic post Rodgers versus Rangers post Caixinha and Murty. So why is he making that comment? Well, he's clinging to any form of relevance. He's trying his best to make a career as a pundit down south. See him popping up on Talk Sport and 5 Live every now and then. I think the media down here have realised that actually Ali McCoist's better at being a pundit, and we don't need Neil Lennon. So that's not really working. I cannot see. I mean, what football club is going to take on Neil Lennon as a manager now? I mean, look beyond Celtic. Look at Bolton. Look at Hibs.
Yeah.
Those were not successful periods. Bolton in particular was a shambles. It was shocking. So, he's desperate, I think, to try and remain relevant. And I think he'll pop up every couple of months. That comment is a funny one. I won 5 out of 7. Well, I'd say 5 out of 8 because he's obviously talking about the Scottish Cup and the League Cup that he lost in that last year. He lost the league, so let's include that. But if it's 5 out of 8, Neil Lennon's second period at Celtic will not be defined by the 5 trophies he won. It'll be defined by those 3 that he lost and how he lost them, because that is a story. How Neil Lennon lost those 3 trophies from the position that they were in when he took on that squad. That's a real story. And that's the reason that he's not getting any other jobs. And that's the reason that he's trying to bump his gums to stay in the spotlight, so people remember who he is. Because otherwise, our Twitter timelines will get clogged up with more and more videos of Neil Lennon at the races, pissed out of his mind and having to be helped into a taxi home. So he needs work, clearly. He needs something to do. And it's an easy target, isn't it? He's also he lost all sort of good favour with the Celtic fans because of how last season unfolded. And that was, you can talk about Scott Brown and Callum McGregor and a few bad eggs in the dressing room. The players were not fit. There was no tactical structure to the team. The coaching was abysmal. It was about more than bad eggs and bad attitudes in the dressing room. There was no direction from the top of the club. And that's on him. That's on the manager. He's never once, as far as I can see, taken any responsibility for that.
No.
So
this is something I think Lennon gets a free ride on. Now, we can all laugh at the images that we've seen of him being in a bit of a drunken state and all the rest of it. But to me, it did kind of point to things not being great in his life and all that kind of thing. There could be maybe issues there. And that's that's by the by. That's fine. If people have got issues, I'm certainly not going to come in and wade in and rip the piss out them. However, one thing I'm quite sort of strong on is if you've got issues, own them and take responsibility for your failings. Now, whether there was reasons behind his professional life failing, well, that's neither here nor there. He failed, but he never seems to own up to it. He never accepts responsibility for when things go wrong. But he's always willing to accept responsibility when things go right. And I found it quite interesting a couple of weeks ago that Scott Brown seemed to be having a go at Neil Lennon when he was talking about his current manager, saying, last season there was no organisation, there was no coaching, there was no this. And I don't think he was talking about Aberdeen there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He was talking about his own personal experience. And I took that as a sort of a dig at Neil Lennon. And I agree with you. I don't think he takes any responsibility. And I think he gets a free ride. I don't think he gets pulled up with the media for that. I think they brush that under the carpet and try everything they can to, make him look a better person than he actually is.
Yeah, I think you're right, because if you were to do a season review of what went wrong at Celtic, the players downed tools after a while, and there was a COVID impact. But as we've just said, it was the lack of tactical direction. It was the lack of sophisticated coaching. There were always rumours coming out that his approach was the 1980s Clough in the dressing room, going absolutely tonto at players who want to view themselves as superstars. Now, rightly or wrongly, that's not going to work in today's environment. And I was delighted with how last season. I don't have a lot of good feeling or goodwill towards Neil Lennon. he is a man who I think has repeatedly just tried to poke fun at Rangers deliberately. So do you remember there's that clip from an old Scottish Cup game, or it was an old game on BT Sport, I think, and Chris Sutton is talking about how the Rangers directors have no direction, they don't know what they're doing, the club's rotten, and Neil Lennon sits there laughing. He loved it. He loved that period. He loved that time of success for Celtic. He contributed nothing to it, though. He contributed nothing to it. His recruitment was appalling. His tactics were shocking. And when the players that Rodgers had acquired had either decided they weren't up for it, they weren't playing for this guy, or they got too old, or they got sold, the thing fell apart. He needs to own that. And like I say, he's burned all of his bridges with the Celtic support. The way, if he wants to repair those bridges, the way to do it is not by talking about how many trophies he won. That's the worst misreading of the room that I've ever seen. The way to do it is to own those failings. Talking about the fact that Steven Gerrard has won 1 out of 9 trophies doesn't really mean anything.
No,
I actually think Lennon will get another gig in Scotland. I think he's got one more. I think he's got one more go. I think he did better at Hibs than you give him credit for. It fell apart towards the end, but I think he had a couple of good seasons. I think he's the kind of manager. You said something interesting there. You said back to late, he's like Clough. That is actually, there is a direct line to Neil Lennon from Clough, because obviously O'Neill was the biggest influence on Lennon as a manager. And O'Neill's biggest influence was Clough. And O'Neill himself said that he styled his management style on Clough, where he basically stayed away from the training ground all week and then would come in and talk to them on a Friday and a Saturday, because he believed that they didn't listen to you if they heard you every day. If they heard you speak every day, they stopped listening to you after a while. So you had to just come in. And, different managers have different ways of working. I'm not condoning that. I'm certainly not complimenting it. It worked for Clough. Neil Lennon's no Brian Clough. But I do think he's actually...
He maybe is in one way of his life, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, you might be right there, actually. That's a good point. Yeah. But I said this last season, half joking, but I actually think he's going to get the Aberdeen job at some point. I think that might happen at some point. I think the Aberdeen job, and there's a match made in heaven. But I think that might happen, because Aberdeen, whatever's happening at Aberdeen, is not working. It's certainly not working just now. They'll tolerate it for a while, but if they're sitting fourth from bottom at Christmas, the manager's gone. And Lennon is the type who could come in and give you, a year, 18 months of players fired up, of players, fighting for the jersey and being hard to beat. And he can do that, and then it'll fall apart, because you're right. There is no bigger picture. There is no structure. It's a motivational type of management that he does, rather than a structural type, in my opinion. But I still think that'll happen. I still think you'll get another gig somewhere.
I don't know what Scott Brown's doing right now, but I know he just shuddered. They just went, whoa. It's got a horrible shudder there. It's all down to you, John. It's your fault.
Imagine if he did go to Aberdeen. They already play at 150% against Rangers, because
I know.
Rivalry. Imagine. Jeez, right. Either that, or he'll end up at Dundee, because the special partnership between those two.
That's not the worst idea either.
Gordon Strachan will get my job. Right, guys, on to the sort of Ryan Porteous stuff through the week there. I thought it was laughable that Hibs put the appeal in the first place. And John, I'll come to you in this one. The whole, I call it sort of, it's like made up controversy. It's manufactured controversy, and it's happening so often now with Rangers games. It happened at the Dundee game. So the last 2 Rangers games before the international break, you had the Dundee game where the referee had a big call to make and got it right. He gave the penalty but didn't send off McLaughlin because he made it. He attempted to get the ball. 100% the right decision. Yeah, it rumbles on for about 4 or 5 days, and and all the papers and all that kind of stuff. Then there was the Ryan Porteous thing. Now I've got to be honest with you, from my seat in the governing rear, when I first seen it, Ryan Porteous one, I was like, oh, don't know if that was a sending off. But when you see it properly on the TV, you're like, no, that is a sending off. He's over the ball, straight leg, studs up. If he'd have connected with Aribo, I don't even want to think. If Aribo's foot was planted and Porteous has met him, he's broke his leg. Yeah, there's still this sort of controversy about the decision, and even some of the pundits in sports scene, they're saying, no, I think, who was it that was on? It was, what's his name? He still owns a chippy in Queen Street, or did. McFadden.
Things you learn on this podcast.
Well, he doesn't anymore. He sold it. But
chip shop in Queen Street.
Yeah, he does.
In the town in Glasgow.
Yeah, he does. He sold it now. But he had a chip. He still had a chip in there. Not that we're going off topic at all. But
I don't even think where there is a chip shop in Queen Street.
It was like a wee cafe chippy towards the bottom of Queen Street. Anyway, he was saying definite red card, blah blah blah. You're the referee on Sky on the Monday that goes over all the big decisions. Both times he was like, no, the referee's got. Yeah, it still rumbles on. You still get your usual prats like Michael Stewart and all that, making this huge big thing about it. And it's just like, I find it boring now. It annoys me, but it's more boring. You know what I mean? It's just like if there's certain people within the media, the minute there's any sort of decision around Rangers, they just try and make it into this big thing when it's not. The referee on both occasions got it right. I mean, I'll give you two similar incidents that got absolutely no sort of highlight after it. The 2-footed tackle from Johnny, I'm having a brain freeze here tonight, plays for Aberdeen, scored against us.
Recently?
He scored. He played for Celtic. Right ugly boy.
Johnny Hayes.
2-footed tackle. Right, 2-footed tackle he put in at the Smyrna game a couple of weeks ago. I don't think he got booked for it, but he certainly never got a red card, right? And it was a definite red card. Again, it was similar to Porteous. He could have done some real damage. And the Celtic penalty against Dundee United had a stonewall penalty denied, right? And that was a red card because the guys made no attempt to play the ball. And that's just discussed and then forgotten about. Whereas two decisions with Rangers that were the correct decision just rumble on. I'm just getting bored of it, if I'm being honest.
There's a number of factors in this for me, Colin, and you could probably spend half an hour talking about it, and I know we've got 5 minutes, so I won't. But I think partly Porteous, gets an easy ride from the media in this country. I think Porteous, because he's young, because he's Scottish, gets a much easier ride. And I'll say this, and I don't think anyone listens to me. Can you imagine Morelos had made that tackle?
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be calling for the death penalty. I mean, there's just no way that it actually would have been the same. I think another factor is it shows just the level of poverty when it comes to understanding the rules of football that pundits have in Scotland. It's there's no doubt it's a penalty. I mean, I was amazed at Hibs putting an appeal. I think they were just playing at the gallery because even the manager after the game wasn't even trying to justify it. So I was baffled that they put in an appeal. Another strange one, another sad one. Michael Stewart, these kind of guys. Stewart knows that he gets. He gets the pats in the back from the people he wants pats in the back from if he's having a go at Rangers. It's boring, but it's reality. It's interesting what you're saying about these things kind of rumble on. I don't know how much that has to do with Rangers' current stance towards the kind of traditional media, and the fact that there really isn't anybody speaking for us just now in the media, and that may be playing a part in why these things kind of seem to rumble on for us. But I think the last thing is that, it's Rangers, so it's box office. And that's why, nobody cares if Johnny Hayes 2 foot's a St Mirren player. If Rangers are involved, then it's box office. It generates headlines, it generates clicks, it generates paper sales, people listening to radio stations. That's the reality. If you're talking about Rangers, then Rangers fans will listen. And so do the fans of all the other clubs. Let's be honest. If this was happening if this was happening if this had been, for example, a Celtic player had done this, or this had happened to a Celtic player, we wouldn't care. So it's not something I would be terribly interested in. You'd maybe see the highlights. You'd maybe think, you know what, that was a sending off, or whatever you're viewing it would have been, and that's that. You move on. You go back to thinking about your own team. Rangers are the box office. Rangers are the ones that drive the media in this country in terms of the sports media, and that's the problem here. But Porteous, I find Porteous frustrating because I think there's a player in there. I do think there's a player in there, but he's clearly got, there's something at the back of his head, and he can't be very bright. He's not very professional. And I mean, if I was the Hibs manager, I'd be furious. I'd be absolutely furious at him getting sent off. I would be so annoyed at that. I'd be so annoyed at him. As far as I'm concerned, they were in a pretty decent position before he gets sent off. I'm not saying that the game wouldn't have turned out the way it did turn out, but he certainly made a thing. They've now lost him for 2 games. Boy's an idiot. At some point, the penny has to drop. That there's no point in just trying to stick Rangers players up in the air. So the more unhinged element of the Hibs support will give you pictures of it. You're a professional football player.
The thing that annoys me about that challenge is he could have won it without doing that. It was. I would say it was sort of 70-30 in his favour. But he has, as you say, he has to make a statement, and the whole thing that comes behind it, with your usual suspects, I find boring. Guys, conscious of time. So, Ross, I'll quickly come to you. I know you've been sort of saying that you think your media is, your internet's not too great. We'll give you a bash here. Just in terms of the season so far, I mean, it's kind of obvious that we've not hit the heights that we've hit from last season. Myself and John had a wee chat about this last week, and his sort of view was, we're not getting as much from the fullbacks. That's the main problem. I wouldn't disagree with that. I would agree with that. But one thing I would also say is I just think far too many players are out of form. When you look at it, I don't think McGregor's made a save of note this season. Tav and Borna haven't been great. Connor Golson's form's dipped. Ryan Kent hasn't been playing the same. Ruth, Aribo, Kamara. You could go through that team and none of them have really hit the form that they had last season. But despite that, we're only a point off the points total that we had last season. So, I mean, there's positives to be taken, but what do we need to improve on, and what is the problem? Why have we not hit those heights we had last season?
In terms of what is the problem, I genuinely think a psychologist would have a field day with this squad. I mean, to try and figure out all of these different factors of momentum, of self-belief and confidence. Look at where Rangers were at their best at the start of last season. That first sort of, let's say, 12-game period at the start of last season, Rangers were imperious and absolutely dominant. It wasn't like that the whole way through the season. In kind of February, March and April, there were some performances that are very reminiscent of what we're seeing at the start of this year. So I think if you were to ask a psychologist to try and figure out why we're not performing the same way that we were last season, it'll be things like momentum, it'll be things like confidence and belief. We've spoken about confidence a little bit already tonight. You then start to factor in questions, well, it's the same players, but there's injury, there's COVID, it's been a little bit stop-start and a bit fragmented. Pre-season wasn't great, so they're probably not feeling as confident and as fresh and raring to go as they might have done last year. There's not as much on the line this year. I mean, we can talk about stopping the 10. That will have played into the kind of motivational speeches of the coaches last season. Some of them will be thinking that we've achieved what we came here to achieve, and does that factor in? Possibly. Is there something to worry about with crowds being back in? Well, hopefully not, but maybe there is something there as well. So I think when you add all of that in, like I say, some very smart people could probably sit down and try and work out how all of that affects a player week on week and the pressures, and that's before you get into their private lives and who's having a tough time away from the park and what's going on with so-and-so's relationships, etc. So all of those different things, I think that we probably don't, I don't think we'll ever fully understand. There's a degree of separation between the players and the fans, and we'll never really get to the bottom of everything that's going on. So that probably goes a long way to explaining, or not explaining why we're not playing the same way, but hopefully justifying why, despite the fact that we've not changed the playing staff, that we're not playing the same way that we were 12 months ago. What do we need to do to change it? I think a period of stability would help. Obviously, we've had a lot of instability, particularly in defence, but really all over the park. With COVID and with injuries, we've been missing. Connor Goldson missed the game for the first time in about a decade, it seems, over the last couple of weeks. We haven't been able to rely fully on either of our fullbacks in the same way that Wood's done last year, so we've had to chop and change there a little bit. Hillander's been injured. Jack Simpson's not living up to the promise at this point, so there's been a lot of chop and changing there. Then we've had Ryan Kent and Yanis Hadji, two of our most creative forces, have been injured and or COVID or whatever it may have been. So a bit of stability would really, really help, I think. And a couple of dominant performances to try and build some of that belief back and get some of that momentum back. We're not going to, like I said at the start of this wee speech, we did not have the dominance of the first 12 games all the way through last season. And I really think that a lot of our March and April football last season is very reminiscent of the football we're playing at the start of this season. So that's okay. And we might go on to have a real spell of dominance. And that's a good thing. That's a very natural thing to have peaks and troughs throughout a season. And I've sat watching Rangers in this room very, very frustrated over the last 2 months. But we're still in a very good spot. It's all about finishing first. And at this point, we're very much on track to do so. So performances aren't good, but we are in the business of winning. We are winning at the moment. We are on track to win at the end of the year. We know the prize is on offer. I think the players should hopefully have that kind of emphasised to them on a weekly basis. If we keep going, there is still something to play for this season, because look at where we will be in a year's time. And I think if we do that, I still have a lot of faith and a lot of belief that we'll find form and we'll carry on churning out winning performances.
John, quickly, as Ross makes some good points here. As I said, we're only a point off the points total that we had last season. We've put a bit of distance, 6 points between us and Celtic. We're 4 points ahead of Hibs. We could put a bit of distance between us and Hearts next week if we beat them. My biggest fear is going, we've had all the sort of tough games at home. We've now got to go to, once we get Hearts out the road, we've then got to go to Pittodrie, we've then got to go to Celtic Park and Easter Road and Tynecastle, I think all before Christmas. But I also feel any kind of extended run of form could be enough this season. You know what I mean? Because I do think Celtic are a bit of a shambles at the moment, and I'm not convinced that Hibs and Hearts will have the legs to keep going until the end of the season. So positives and negatives to take. How do you feel about it in terms of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the league, I agree entirely with yourself and Ross there. I mean, the analysis is spot on. I also don't think Hibs or Hearts have the squad to put in a season-long challenge. They've both, particularly Hearts, they've had a pretty decent start to the season and seem to be playing well and are hard to beat. But I think, like all of us, I'll be very disappointed if we don't beat them at the weekend. You would still expect to beat Hearts at home. You want to win the league, you need to beat Hearts at home. That's just one of these things. Celtic clearly still are, hit and miss. They still are clearly capable of putting 6 past some teams and then then losing the next game. So long may that continue. I don't see them sorting that out much before the January break, and I don't think Celtic have the kind of money that they had 3 or 4 seasons ago just now. So how they'll go about sorting that problem is their problem. I fortunately don't have to worry about that. I just hope they don't. So the league is ours to lose. And if we can find a bit of form, then I don't see any issues there. I think the biggest disappointment this season has been Europe. For the first time under Gerrard. And I think actually, that was one of the reasons I think the support got behind Gerrard, because you could see what he was doing and our performances in Europe and the way we played, not just winning, but the style of football we're playing, was so integral to what Gerrard was trying to do and became so much of what we loved about the football we're playing and the style. And so to see us this season struggle in Europe, we have struggled, we've been poor.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest frustration and the biggest disappointment. And I think that's possibly why this season feels like a bit of a it hasn't really got going yet. We're all a wee bit disappointed. Where in reality, we should be fairly happy where we are. But if we had been offered 6 points ahead of Celtic, top of the league at this stage, if we'd given us that at the start of the season, we've all said, yeah, thanks very much. I'll take that. And yet here we are. And Ross is dead right. We're not. We haven't. There's too many players just not quite hit the heights of last season, and maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be one of those seasons where we just never quite hit the heights. We just do enough. As long as we do enough, then that's fine. Because, like you say, the big prize is qualification next season.
Right, guys. Looking at the clock there, we've overrun a wee bit, but that's fine. Keeps Frankie up for another wee 10 minutes. Right, guys, thanks for that. So big thanks to Ross and John for their contributions. Great stuff from them, as always. We'll try and get a preview show out on Friday night for the big game on Saturday against Hearts, and obviously we'll have the flagship show next week on Sunday, looking at that game. In the meantime, get yourself onto the Gersnet website and forums at www.gersnet.co.uk. Guys, look after yourself, have a good week, and we'll see you next week. And until next time, bye for now.